to session 3, the last session for today before the network drink. The session is called Strategic Planning, Implementing the Network Strategy Plan, and it is Razvan that is moderating.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will try to keep you awake with a number of interesting subjects that we will be addressing today. The first part of the presentation will make a scan of the network strategic projects, looking in subjects that are in process of being implemented or trialed as part of the implementation of the network strategy plan, operational improvements, technical improvements in the NM systems, and what is in the pipeline for the future. Then, this will be done together with my colleague Pino Ancampora, who is the head of the projects coordination unit, and he is in charge with the implementation of the network strategic projects in the area of cooperative traffic management, flight data and flight plan exchange, advanced flexible use of airspace, etc., etc., etc. Then after, you will see which are those aspects, and there will be some interesting subjects there, like, amongst other things, implementing complexity in the network management systems, talking about the dynamic RAD and how we are going to have a better approach towards the flexible use of airspace, etc. Then we will have an overlook with my colleague Ivan Pendachansky on the network operations concept, indicating which are the more medium long-term developments that we were envisaging through the development of the network operations concept. And this is very important because on this basis we will evolve other more detailed operational concepts in the meantime, and we will also develop the INM system, about which we will hear a little bit more tomorrow. And last but not least, and I hope this will keep in the room all of you, because this will stay between this subject and the evening cocktail, it will be the implementation of FFIs that will be presented by my colleagues Magnus Malbeck from the Cesar Deployment Manager, and I will also briefly support him on a number of subjects related to implementation of FFIs. So quite interesting projects for this afternoon, and let's move on, Pino. So the first presentation addresses the network strategic projects and the CP1 compliance, and I think this is very important. So how we are actually consolidating the technical and operational evolutions. We have a network strategy plan that was adopted in 2019 for the reference periods 3 and 4. This was discussed in the network cooperative decision-making processes with inputs from all the operational stakeholders from the states. It was consulted also with the states, and eventually, following the endorsement of the Network Management Board, it has been approved through a decision of the European Commission. Then we have developed a high-level network concept of operations. Over the last 4 years, we had 2 versions of this. The first one was adopted in the spring of 2020, and the second one last summer, and this will be subject of the presentation later on, why we had to revise it to take into account the latest developments in the network and the latest challenges in the network that we have seen through the COVID period, but also other challenges that we had in the meantime, and making sure that we include in this network concept of operations much better interfaces related to the infrastructure, on how the infrastructure plays a major role to enable operations in the network, but also to address aspects related to environmental challenges and to resilience. Then we have an NM interoperability strategy that we will be addressing in the course of this presentation with the implementation of another important CP1 requirement, that is the SWIM implementation under AF5, and we will explain where we are with all that. And of course, the network operations plan, implementing the network strategy plan. All the detailed plans concerning the network strategic projects are described in the network operations plan. All this forms a cohesive package responding to network strategy, concepts, and performance needs, and they form the backbone for the future developments that we are foreseeing in the new INM system for network operations. A little bit about the network strategic projects and the CP1 compliance. In the context of the network management functions and the network manager activities, the main ATM functionalities of the Common Projects Implementing Rule refer to the ATFM functionality 3, that is related to flexible use of airspace and free route airspace, to the ATM functionality 4 related to air traffic flow management, and to the ATM functionality 5 related to SWIM. And you can see here a number of examples of what has been already implemented in the NM systems. We did not put here the full compliance matrix, but the good news is that by this very date, the network manager is compliant with the requirements put on it from the CP1 implementing rule. And by doing that, we are enabling the compliance of the operational stakeholders, because without our compliance, you cannot be compliant, because you cannot benefit from a number of network functionalities in order for yourselves to implement the obligations that are put on you in this respect. And of course, a number of those subjects will be addressed in the context of the current of this session. So at this point in time, for this moment in time, I would say we are in full CP1 compliance. And in order to demonstrate that, my colleague Pino will start going now through a number of network strategic projects, explaining to you in detail where we are now, where we expect to be in the course of this spring and in the course of this summer, and a little bit a longer outlook on where we expect to be in the future, also through the implementation of INM. Pino, good luck.
Thanks, Razvan. Good afternoon, everyone. It will be a bit of ping pong in this presentation with Razvan. And you give me, I have two challenges, I would say. The first one is to make my presentation in less than 20 minutes. I'm quite talkative, so I'll try to do my best. And the second, to keep your attention, because at 4 o'clock in the afternoon is also a big challenge as well. So I start with, as I said, I will go a little bit in detail of some the three strategic projects mentioned by Razvan. I will start the CTM. This picture is just to impress you, to say that we are doing a lot of stuff. In reality, to summarize in simple words, we are improving a lot of the cooperation between the different partners in order that we can have a more efficient procedure in place. I will now, if I dig in a little bit more in this CTM roadmap, we have two major areas that we are addressing to improve the usage of targeted measures. This is to minimize or to reduce the need to have the classical ATFM measure to be more fine-tuning, therefore to reduce the overall detail. And the other one is to, let's say, improve the monitoring of the performance, improving the measurement of this performance and the simulation activities in order that we can also try to identify the best measure we can apply. That this is also an important step we are looking for. All this through a number of enablers in terms of improving algorithm, improve what if capability of the system, that it helps the two different areas that I mentioned before. We have a so-called stepped approach. We started with the simple stuff and we start to improve or introduce more and more complex elements. And I will mention a few of the couple of them. One is the STAM RRP. So we are using the rerouting proposal mechanism to propose STAM. In this case, we are trying to improve the collaborative decision process between FMP, NM, and airspace users. Until 26 today, let's say we started to use with the usage of defined scenarios. With 27, we will introduce a new capability to use this kind of process also for the definition of ad hoc measures. We will start with the trials. We will start with a few INSPs that help us in looking at this improvement, and then hope sooner or later will come operationally. The other one is the usage of the occupancy count. Occupancy count, you know quite well, is a way to improve the way of monitoring the traffic load. And with this, we want to try to introduce occupancy regulations that could be, again, a bit more precise compared with the standard application of the regulation. We are in the phase to introduce a new technical change that will come with the 27. We will have a number of trials with some of the volunteers, FMP, and after these trials, the idea is to offer this opportunity later on to any FMP. The other area in DCTM that we are working a lot, we spend a lot of resources improving the flight efficiency process. We do in a different way, but the final goal is to get a benefit in terms of economic and environmental benefit, and overall improving the planning process. We discussed before this morning predictability versus dynamicity and so on. I will come back on this later on. To improve the planning operations that will help the network, the overall network performance. One of the ways to improve this flight efficiency is through this system support, this what is called opportunity tool. So the opportunity through our system to detect eventually any kind of opportunity for the airspace users to improve their flight plan, again, improving the flight plan. And this is done through the definition of, to be more precise, instead of the standard way of notifying to airspace users opportunity, to define dedicated templates that each of the aircraft operators can coordinate with us to define the parameters that are more relevant for them in order the system is tailored to identify only the options that really make sense for you. And this is another way to have a better process in place in terms of notification to you to be sure that you can take on board this information. This is the general opportunity tool. So with this kind of usage of template, that we have more than 70 customized template currently, and anyone is free to ask us to define this template. The opportunity tool is flagging this flight that the system, not we, the system identify an opportunity for you. You can scroll down all the different opportunities, it's not only one, depends on the parameter that we have selected. We can find the different options, and then you decide which of them makes sense for you, because at the end, you are airspace users, you are the originator of the flight plan, you are the owner of the flight plan. It's up to you the decision to accept or not. We can also offer the opportunity to receive directly a message, a RRP message, if you want, again, saying that this is the best option we have identified. And then the same as before, up to you to define the proposal. We don't stop with where we are. We have a lots of improvement plan in the 27. We try to catch as much as possible with the 27 that is currently the last one for the current system, to improve the performance of the algorithm, to facilitate the identification of opportunities. This is quite important in free route environment. That becomes a little bit more difficult, plus other improvement that I'm not going one by one, but certainly all of them are aiming to improve the usage of the template, to improve also the feedback to us. We will have the functionality that you will tell us whether you like or not a proposal, to fine tune better the kind of information we can share with you. And last but not least, also improving this process via B2B. It's not the end of the story. We have also in the pipeline additional improvements that will come in INM probably, definitely. And one of them is, for instance, the opportunity to have a full and automated rolling process of this GRRT whenever there is a change produced by AUP UUP. This is one of the changes that are embedded in the overall CTM project. So the CTM project, I show where we are. We still have in the pipeline a number of improvements that will come later on. For the time being, we do not sit and wait INM. We will work for INM to define new requirements for the system and see how much we can exploit the current capability. So we are looking at improving the GRT asset, improving target time and any other measure, including the flow monitoring and so on, and system support. The next project is flight plan and flight data exchange. I will not spend too much time on this because we have another presentation later on about release one. We are looking in three major directions. One is linked to the standard fixed SIM that are evolving. Another one, the support to ICAO to define the standardization at the worldwide level. And the third one is the stepped approach we use for the implementation of FFIs. For the quickly for the cooperation with the ICAO is essential to be sure that we can have standard applied worldwide. Is not a European business only, is not whatever. So we need to do at a worldwide in the same direction. We are contributing a lot to achieve this harmonized approach. For the FFIs, I said not too much because we'll come later on another presentation. We have implemented a number of services according to CP1 in different steps, in different phases. All the greens are covered. The third phase, that is what left in a certain way, is focusing on the planning services. That is a service optional, not required by the CP1 regulation, but is an important one we want to work because this could be the way to receive from you the desired flight plan, not polluted yet by restriction or other stuff, in order that we can, at the network and the cooperation with the local, try to organize the resources, the capacity to match with your desired trajectory. This is an important one and is not mentioned here. The next step is also the FFI's release 2 that is looking at the airborne phase. That is another way to share information for the airborne flights in order that we can also, at that point, already in flight, improve downstream predictability for the other sector. So there is a lot of stuff boiling. We have also prepared lots of documentation to support the implementation of the release 1 that is coming. You will know later on which are the schedule. For this project, last but not least, to mention about the implementation, we are planning for 27, so April this year, about the improved OAT flight plan. So this is a long story that for years we were speaking about this idea to allow IFPS to process OAT flight plans, and now becomes a reality. So this is, I'm a bit proud because we push a lot of this. We will have an initial implementation only for a few states, pioneer states, 3 of them. We will have a simple receiving, processing, validating the flight plan, and then distribute to the interested partners. But it's a good step forward. So it was a big achievement for us to have this in NAM release 27. Now I move on my favorite projects, my babies, I call. One is the AFUA, that is Advanced Flexible Use of iSpace, that I worked more than 20 years in this area. So this picture in the nutshell provide a visualization of where we were and where we are going, and the right side in blue. Most of them are already implemented. Some of them are still under validation with CESAR, or we are working directly in the strategic project. In short, the idea is that, if I can synthesize with a few words, we want to improve the dynamicity, we want to improve the predictability, and we want to be sure that everyone is aware what's going on. You say, how so? I just anticipated the Q&A session. How is it possible? It is difficult. We don't like easy stuff, but it is possible. I put always a practical example, the evolution we had from AUP to the UUP rolling. So the AUP was several years ago. We have only this one, D-1 plan, And then the day of operation, any change that normally happens were treated tactically. So very flexible, but highest level of unpredictability due to tactical operation. With the UUP now, we have the possibility every 30 minutes to notify us changes in the airspace, that these changes automatically can be shared with the aircraft operators and they can update their flight plan. That means improve predictability. Of course, if everyone does the proper work. So, but it is an example of the two not necessarily are contradicting each other, but they can go together. One of the areas we are working a lot in this advanced flexible user space project is the integration of the airspace management and traffic flow capacity management. That is the natural step, are two sides of the same coin, if you want. The two are going together. We have the few examples where we see is no more ASM issue, but becomes also ASM, ATFCM solutions that comes together. If you start to speak about the usage of restrictions, the usage of MPZ or whatever, it's evident that ISM part is not the only one responsible. If this, I add other example like the dynamic RAD that I will mention later on, it's evident they need to be together. We have already in the trials a few examples that the dynamic RAD was able to provide some relaxation, so improved trajectory, and this trajectory was passing through an area. So if the area is active, all the benefit of the RAD restriction are lost immediately. So there is a need to have these two components together. We had the number of improvements plan for 27, that also for the AFUA is the last one, at least for the what we want to improve in the short term, I would say. We have a number of improvements, both in terms of facilitating the CDM process between local and the network manager, and we have other improving the notification to the airspace users. I just mentioned the last one, single CDR category. Finally, we are moving to have all the CDR1, even from a technical point of view. So from the next, after 27, you will not see anymore the reference to the CDR2. We have a number of other improvements like the management of scenarios that will facilitate the coordination of cluster areas that could have an effect on traffic flows between MC and the network manager. This, it's important to clarify that will not have an impact on the aircraft operators because they will see in AUP the same kind of information, so the areas. So we try to minimize the effect on the airspace users systems. Dynamic RAD, another baby for me, is the last for this short presentation. These are the conclusions of the final report after the trial we made 2 years ago. I will not go one by one, just to say that at the end of the story, all the partners agree to go ahead. So we got the green line, is a good idea, let's proceed on it and see which step we need to do. So one of the first steps is to identify which kind of technical improvement we can implement to promote the usage of the dynamic RAD. We look at a lot in the outcomes of the trials, also in terms of qualified information provided by the different stakeholders. So one of the improvement in the AUP that remain at this stage, the tool to manage the dynamic RAD, in the future we'll see with INM. So one is to allow the direct management of the restriction for those involved or heard already about dynamic RAD. During the trials, we use this fictitious triggered zones because the system is defined to play with the areas, and then you can add how many restrictions you want. The idea is to get rid of these triggered zones that are not published in any national publication and allow the system to manage directly the restrictions. And the other one also to promote again the management of this dynamic RAD was to allow the FMP to manage directly the restriction, being more related to FMP responsibility than AMC. Some of the states clearly said, without this, we are not ready to play. We'll give them the chance, so which other excuse you can find. So both of them required a certain changes in our system, not easy change, I would say. The first one is the introduction of new types of restriction, what we call AUP RAD, different from the others, FUA-RAD or FUA restriction, because the other two are totally linked to an area that is activated. And then I said you can link any kind of restriction associated to the area. This is a completely new category, new animal, de facto has no link at all with the area. So you manage directly this restriction. To do this, we were forced to introduce this new category, AUP RAD. And this kind of information will be afterwards notified in the AUP, in the European AUP, through a new dedicated tab, sorry, and both of them implies, also this implies a change of a technical system, not only from us, but also from all the different actors, local SM tools, and last but not least, CFSP's aircraft operator systems. So for these changes that are not minor, the idea is to organize what we call transition period that we hope is never-ending transition. So we hope at a certain point we can jump on it, but we need to give time to all the partners to update their system. And of course, when we start, we realize this, one of the options say, okay, what we'll do until everyone is ready. Do nothing is not an option. So the idea is to continue, let's say, in the frame of the trials we use during the validation period, to continue with the same kind of mechanism, so-called long-term trials. First, to allow NSPs to propose or start continuing playing with the dynamic RAD, to get also confidence on this. It's not easy to digest, I would say. So far, we have an IRE and DSNA that started last year. We have other in the pipeline. And of course, to the airspace users to take effective benefit in terms of opportunity offered by the dynamic RAD. So this is a process that we expect to continue until we have the full migration by the different systems. So we need a certain roadmap from the stakeholders to say when they could be ready, in order that we can jump afterwards in the normal operations. One in the implementation that we are discussing, there were some points that still are to be clarified in a certain way. First of all, which RAD we are speaking about. So if I look at the RAD document, we are speaking of more than 12,000 restrictions. So if you tell me tomorrow all of them will become dynamic, I would say, I believe not. So there will be a need to select or to identify which RAD are more effective to be managed dynamically. But certainly we do not make at this stage, at least, a differentiation between types of RAD that could be used dynamically. And if I look at the structure of the RAD document, de facto there are two categories, if I can say. One is categories of flow rules that imply some restrictions, so level capping and so on, FUA and the others. And another one that is providing some planning facilitation in terms of option to the aircraft operators, like the en route DCT. Now, if I look at the dynamicity of the process, of course, the notification we do through the AUP-UP, keeping the meaning of these two categories is to use AUP for the first category to notify the activation of the restriction, and in the second category to notify the activation of the facilitation. So they are working in two different ways, the information. Now, this is a topic to discuss a little bit, saying we would like to have an harmonized approach that the message is the same, go in the same direction, or being de facto processed via B2B, so via system to system. It's enough that the publication is to be considered reflecting the information that is in the RAD document. So this is a topic that needs to be clarified. RMG will be the working arrangement that will take care of this. Of course, what we would like to do, an easy implementation for you and for everyone, in order that there is no risk of misunderstanding. And with this, Razvan, I finish my part. Back to you again.
And of course, we will have opportunities for some questions a little bit earlier, but this gives you the picture of where we are now, of what we have done now on all the network strategic projects and the good alignment that we have with the CP1 requirements. Another important topic is the interoperability strategy, and I would like to highlight here two aspects. The first one is the transition to the SWIM policy that has been adopted by the Network Management Board following consultation with the network directors of operations and with the network technical directors. This transition to SWIM policy is again implementing the requirements of the CP1 implementing rule, and the agreement was to set a sunset date for 31st of December 2027 for 3 messages. We plan to decommission the provision of those messages through other means other than B2B by that date, and of course any new user will only be provided with the NM B2B connection. I would like also to recall to everybody that we are asking the ANSPs, the airlines, everybody who is involved in that to provide us with their transition plans until 2027. This policy has been agreed in the course of 2021-2022. So we gave a 5 years pre-notification for the decommissioning of something that is really, really minor, I would say. And we hope that this will work. For the rest of the messages, for some of them, the plan is to decommission beyond 2027, but the sunset date has not yet been set. For a number of messages, this policy is not applicable. And as you can see in the description of this slide. Very important also is to mention that all our services are now SWIM compliant. They are conformant with the EUROCONTROL specification for SWIM, are operational and are published in the European SWIM registry. This is very, very important because again, this enables your compliance. The only services where we do not have this compliance is on as consumer of meteorological information services and volcanic ash information because our suppliers are not SWIM compliant. But for everybody else, for absolutely everything else, we are fully SWIM compliant, fully aligned with the CESAR deployment program and with the CP1 implementing rule. And this is very, very important for your compliance again. And we are a little bit ahead the deadlines, I would say. There are hundreds of organizations relying on our services, and we could not afford not to be ready before the target date in order to allow your compliance with those requirements. Then a little bit about the implementation of nConnect. We are progressing well with the implementation of nConnect on the areas related to the airspace HMI, the dynamic network plan, the RAD and the CAL HMI, the flight HMI, the flow HMI. And this is very good because it will help in the next steps that you will see tomorrow for the transition to INM and the digital platform. And very shortly, we will come to you with an update plan on how we want this transition to happen in order to find the cheapest, fastest, and best technical and operational solution to transition all our systems and all our interfaces, to the digital platform and to progress with the development of new functionalities. This has been discussed also with a number of ANSP's CEOs, and on the basis of this approach that will be discussed in the coming weeks internally with respect to the digital platform and INM evolution, we will initiate discussions as part of the work that is currently ongoing on the development of the ATFM ASM CONOPS, for instance, on the development of the new tools that will support you yourselves in making progress with a more dynamic ATFM and airspace management. And why not, we'll address one of the operational excellence aspects related to the harmonization of the local tools and gradually progressing through with the full support from the network tools. Dear colleagues, this was the presentation of what we are doing in the context of the network strategic projects. We are bang on time with the implementation of all the aspects included in the network strategy plan to this effect, both from an operational point of view, from a technical point of view with our systems, but also from a regulatory point of view with regard to the compliance with the CP1 implementing rule. So this concludes this first part of this session. I would like now to introduce my colleague Ivan Pendachansky. Ivan is well known by yourselves. He's the head of our strategy unit. Ivan has an excellent operational and technical background. He is in charge with the development now of the network strategy plan, because we will review it in the course of this year. He is, I would say, the brain behind the network operations concept, and he is helping all the other teams in the development of the domain-related concepts of operations. Ivan was the author of the 2B services roadmap. He was leading that together with our colleagues for INM, and he has been fully involved in many aspects related to the definition of the INM work. Thank you for that, and the floor is yours on the network CONOPS, Ivan.
Thanks, Razvan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see in such a big number again here in this room. So I will try to be quite short because it's almost 5. So I will go through to brief you what is contained in the network operation concept in the CONOPS that we developed last year. Just to say that it's not the first instance of this document. So we have 4 rounds. However, by somehow it remain a widely unknown document. It's mainly for the directors at the level of NetOps and OpenDTEC. But for the rest, it's widely unknown. So we have the first and second release that they are related to the previous edition of network strategy plan and to the previous reference periods. We have third edition that was done just before COVID, so in a very tight schedule following the nomination and adoption of the current edition of the network strategy plan. And however, what Razvan said, we detected some anomalies there. So we decided to go for a 4th release of this document. And you can see that how the title of this document has been changed throughout the time, going from the concept to framework, with the dates and coming back to concept again. So we done the extensive stakeholder consultation for this document through the NM cooperative arrangements process, going to different teams, to the end OpenDTEC, and finally to NMB. So this is the document. It's widely available, so it's put on the corporate EUROCONTROL website, so you can Google and find it. So what is the purpose of this document? The purpose of this document is to provide high-level view of the target network operation by 2029. Synthesized in the high-level implementation roadmap. The follow-up of the implementation planning is foreseen to be done via the network operation plan, and we address all network components as defined by NM function implementing rule. So why it is necessary? So there are several reasons put here in some kind of puzzle without any particular order. So it's the second level of the operationalization of network strategy plan. So I will come on the next slide on this. So it provides a high-level agreement between the concerned stakeholders what needs to be done in the forthcoming RP3, RP4. It used to update the different types of the roadmaps, operational, technical, that are contained in the network operation plan. It has been used for the network strategic project that Pino mentioned it in the presentation before. So basically it is not focusing only on the NM functions and tasks. It's also address the complete network. So the interfaces with ATC, with airspace users. So it also have a view on the infrastructure part. What it's important that we develop this to cater a future network system, HNM, future the service roadmap for INM. Also, based on this, we will develop 3 separate CONOPSes for the different part of. So it will be for the trajectory CONOPS, flow CONOPS, and integrated data layer CONOPS addressing the CAGD and EAD integration. So it is a multi-purpose document that could be used by everybody for a high level indication what are the expectations in the forthcoming period. So I will come to this operationalization. What does it mean? So we said in the previous slide that with this we would like to do the operationalization of the network strategy plan. So it is the process that is not directly measurable and interfered by other phenomena. So it's a concept that clearly distinguishable, measurable, and understandable by empirical observation. So it means in the broader sense that it is some kind of extension of the network strategy plan to provide more details how the strategic objectives of network strategy plan should be implemented. So what is not? So network CONOPS is not the summary of existing document. It does not show how to achieve, but what to achieve. So we are not also rewriting the existing documentation. We put them in a cohesive way and integrating them. It is not planning document, so it's not ATM master plan. It is not a CESAR deployment program or operational excellency program. It is mainly related to the content, what needs to be implemented, not how. So the network CONOPS follows the well-known structure of how the CONOPS is developed, assessing the current situation, identify shortcomings, assess the impact of performances, addressing the overall cost and benefit of implementing the CONOPS, and defining the direction for changes. So here in this CONOPS, we have 5 main direction of changes. It's optimized network design, optimum capacity and flight efficiency planning, trajectory and cooperative traffic management, airport and TMA network integration, and network component system and CNS infrastructure. So those are the main direction of change. So each of them have been clustered into 2 groups, reflecting each reference period, RP4 or RP3 and RP4, and they are organized in the different operational phases of the flight, starting from strategic through the execution and finalizing in post-ops. So what is the aim of this CONOPS? The aim of the CONOPS is that the ATM, the European ATM network in 2029, end of 2029, 2030, would be capable to accommodate 50,000 flights per day in a peak day of 2029, which is approximately 40% increase comparing with the peak traffic demand in 2019, that was 37,000 in endemic area. So again, we are speaking about the peak traffic. So we are not speaking about the stat for forecast. So we got a lot of comments about this. We are speaking that the demand in the summer season 2029, 2030, which we expect that might reach 50,000 flights per day. So we need to do some investments, accommodation of the operational need in this network to cater this demand. We also need to expect maybe bigger demand that needs to be accommodated as well. So in that respect, the CONOPS needs to provide the substantial improvements of the network in terms of capacity, flight efficiency, cost effectiveness, and sustainability. So in order to start building this, we need to have some essential building blocks that needs to be put in place. So they are presented on a slide, that is full dynamicity of airspace organization and utilization that we intend to reach with a big cross-border deployment, cross-border airspace structure and delegation of ATS services where and when required, enhance air-ground data exchanges, full implementation that will be addressed at the after me of FFI Release 1 services, and potentially the integration by some stakeholder, mainly by NM of Release 2. What is important is we need to achieve the continuous trajectory synchronization and information sharing from the planning horizon into the execution. For that purpose and for the next one of fully sharing flight information with all network actors, we are developing a separate CONOPS that is some of you have been already be aware, or it was presented. It's a forwarded network trajectory CONOPS, and we also need fully scalable and resilient ATM network. So we put also the as an indicative high-level roadmap that put in place all requirement components at the network and local level in the time dimension between 2022 and 2029. So what are the major improvements? The core part was quite well covered, flight and flow, but we make some let's say adjustment there that are needed. We also put more focus on INSP system improvements that are okay. Some of them are local, but many of them have interrelation with the other network actors. We include as a new task that was given to NM, the infrastructure evolution. We defined the roles and responsibility for each actor. So what roles and how the roles of the ATM actor can change by 2029. And there, I think if we go deeply, we can see that many roles, there are new roles, or the existing roles will be substantially modified. We also come with the operational enhancement coming from our new system, INM, and my colleague Gianni Lenti developed a specific annex, call it NMFC improvement in the context of INM, where we defined what are our expectation from pure operational perspective of the new system. So these are the additional changes that are taken into consideration. I will not go through all of them, but they, as Razvan say, are the trigger to start updating this document. So we also need, I think here it's quite important to underline, to include FFI's planning service that was already mentioned, because it will provide more accurate estimation of the traffic demand, also new entrants, and the expected changes of the role and the responsibility. So here we have also for the operational staff, also for the engineering staff in NM and in INSPs. So what are the most important directions for change by 2025? You can see here, it's cross-border freight connectivity with TMA, ISM ATFCM integration that was mentioned in the previous TMA optimization, extension of the transfer and coordination dialogue capability, multi-slot swapping, FFI release 1, that is the most challenging one. Pagnus will address further. Our tolling network plan and CDM, extended AMAN, AOP integration, integration of small airports, initial delivery of INM with EID CAGD integration, and the swim yellow profile exchanges mandated by CP1 that are addressed. That is for 2025. For 2029, we have the biggest one we expect to be the delivery of INM. We have additional that it's related to the 4D trajectory management at the network level, enhance the CAPOC process, virtualization, further enhancement of CPD exchanges, further enhancement in ETFMS with a multi-constraint resolver, integration of ATFCM with ATC with the KINAP function, dynamic airspace configuration. So again, those are the major things that might need to happen by the end of this decade. So we use all this information to update the network roadmaps that are published in the network operation plan. We have the evolution roadmap that is identical from the high-level CONOPS. We completely revisited the operational roadmap and aligned with the goals and content of the CONOPS. And we also address the technical roadmap is currently covering TNM release processes. It will up till NM27, and afterwards we intend to replace this by the technical roadmap that will be developed by KNM contractor, and on this we need to have a full agreement of all operational stakeholders of what will happen and when. So this is the high-level roadmap. So you can see on the left side the 5 direction of changes, and operational improvements are clustered and tied with this and put in the post reasonable from our perspective time horizon for the implementation. And this is my last slide, so I will give a floor to Magnus and Razvan.
Many thanks, Ivan. So the next presentation that will conclude this session, I think it's a very another very important presentation of this session that will describe to you the requirements for the FFI's implementation from a holistic perspective, from a CP1 perspective, but also what applies to each and every category of stakeholders. Towards the end of the presentation, we will also explain to you how we will start addressing it in a very much cooperative and hands-on manner between the deployment manager and the network manager. Magnus, the floor is yours. Good evening almost.
Thank you, Razvan, and good evening almost to everyone. I'm the one who should entertain you about the regulatory requirement at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I look forward to seeing you stay awake for that. So the regulatory framework, it's important to just try to put it in context. Everything that we are working on now in the Society Deployment Manager, including FFIs that we will discuss today, is coming out of the European ATM Master Plan, and leading to the essential operational changes and essentially also the regulation, CP1. And out of CP1, we developed the Society Deployment Program, which is the work plan for CP1 deployment. For the context, it's important to remember the timeline also that you see in the corner down, that everything started 2014. So we have the regulation since 2014. It's not called Pilot Common Project anymore, but it's called Common Project 1 now. And the deadline is December 2025. And the mandate, I will come in on more details later. This is you.
Just on this slide, we were agreeing with Magnus to recall this slide in the context of this presentation to say that the FFI's implementation is fully included in the network strategy plan. And this is a network strategy plan, is not the network manager strategy plan. It is fully included in the CESAR deployment program that Magnus will refer to. It is part of the network operations plan. So this was quite significantly shared with all the operational stakeholders, and it is part of the major implementation programs that have been agreed in all these contexts, letting aside the fact that there is a regulatory requirement for its implementation. Thank you, Magnus.
Thank you, Razvan. Okay, moving further into the details. So in the regulation, CP1, we have 6 ATM functionality. Today, we will focus on ATM functionality 5, which is the system-wide information management. This is the one that is being discussed a lot, but it's sometimes hard to understand because it's an enabling functionality. We have ATM functionality, AF1 to AF6. Again, often we have communicated these functionalities as silos. So each one is their own silo, but actually they all interact. And this is the important one, where SWIM is the glue or the fuel in the middle, making it makes sense, the whole regulation. The Gantt chart, this is just to show you the complexity of it. I will not go into the details. The important is the AF5 deadline, 25, and that the other ATM functionality, they are linked, they are interdependent with AF5, the SWIM functionality. Today, we will focus on a sub-family called Family 561, Flight Information Exchanges. So why are we doing this? This is an important question. So why are we standing here? Why do we have CP1? The answer is trajectory-based operations. The concept that we have discussed for years, worked out, it's a global concept, and it's been promoted for years. It's envisaged as a solution to many of today's limitations. And it's a global concept, as I said, meaning it will bring us global benefits, collaborative decision-making, more accurate view of trajectory, and also a common view of the trajectory. These are some of the high-level benefits. But again, trajectory-based operation is an overall concept where many small solutions fit into the whole. And CP1 is consisting of many of these small solutions that fit into the TBO concept. And SWIM and FFIs is an enabler for TBO. It's a ground enabler of TBO for sure. And the CONOPS, there's a CONOPS under development. I think it was already mentioned by EUROCONTROL earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, and on the next slide is just to recall what was presented in the context of the Network Strategic Projects presentation. We are now, NM is now fully compliant with the FFI's Release 1 services requirements that are included in the CP1 implementing rule. We have been compliant since the releases 25 and 26, the NM releases 25 and 26, and we are implementing further fine-tunings in the release 27, and the first FFI's flight plan has been processed in December 2022. What is important to say here also, in support of what Magnus was showing on the previous slide, is that this is just the first step towards much more significant developments and operational benefits. And if we do not manage to make this first step on time, that we will, all of us, run the risk of not being able to derive the operational benefits of the of what is expected to come after FFI's Release 1. Next to you, Magnus.
Thank you. Okay, the family that I mentioned. So we call them family. This is a subfamily 561 flight information exchanges. Already by EUROCONTROL earlier, Pino mentioned these services. As you see in the regulation, we have 5 services that we will focus on today. The extended AMAN swim service, we will park today. We can discuss that another day. Let's focus on FFI services. So there are the 5 services. I realized that in some of the other slides, you see that some of them are called mandatory, some of them are called optional, but we need to distinguish between the ICAO concept where they have calling some of the service optional and mandatory. Nevertheless, in Europe, they are mandated. So these services that you see here, the publication, notification, trial, filing, and flight data request services are mandated services in Europe for all ATM stakeholders. This is a very important one to not be confused about. And they are being, so they are, as Rasman has emphasized, they are implemented and being provided today. So in the deployment program, this is actually a snapshot of the deployment program. We have tried to provide as much help as possible to the stakeholders, where you see who is going to provide the service, who is going to consume it. And you see, just so we don't get a question on that, airspace users are recommended to use the trial service. So that is true. There's no mandate for them to use that service, but it's beneficial for them to do it. And the services provide the following capabilities, as you see, the filing service, which is a service that the airspace users will have to use to file EFPL. And then there is the trial service, that is the what if, so they can test their flight planning. Notification service would be the departure arrival information. We know it today as departure information and arrival messages that we send today. Publication is the means by which the EFPLs that have been filed by airspace users will be distributed to ANSPs via the NMB2B services. And then we have the flight data request service is the request of supplementary flight plan information, etc., as we know them today, also done via AFTN today. All of this is, of course, via the B2B services that are swim compliant, which has been clarified today. And an important element is that it's not the capability of receiving these services that you are implementing only. You're also, CP1 mandates the usage of the information, meaning the information being provided by the airspace users will have to be used in the systems on ground, ANSPs, etc. This is a very important detail. It's not only the capability, you have to use the information. And we will go a little more into details on that later.
Indeed, and on the next slide, what we are explaining is the way in which we have implemented it. Because what we had to make sure is that in any major project, there is always a transition period. And we wanted to make sure that nobody would suffer during this transition period. But of course, the transition period must be very short. So what this means, in fact, if we receive an EFPL, an FFI's, let's say, flight plan, and we transmit it to a receiver that is not yet FFI's compliant, we will translate this into the flight plan 2012 format. We can still receive flight plan 2012 formats, and we will transmit this in the flight plan 2012 format. We can receive FFI's flight plans and transmit FFI's flight plans to the compliant receivers. So everything will be possible to cope with the transition period. But this transition period must be short. Actually, the transition period started already in September last year with the reception of the first FFI's flight plan, and we hope that it will not go very long beyond 31st of December 2025. Back to you, Magnus.
Thank you, Razvan. And indeed, and just to add on to this message, it's important to say that should you, after 2025, still use the translated services, that means non-compliance to CP1. An important message. You need to use the data, so a translation is not an acceptable means of complying with the regulation. So, what system does this impact? This is a question that we often get. So, how does it impact us? And maybe as a rule we can all apply is that the system you today use flight plan 2012 data are impacted by a transition from flight plan 2012 to EFPL, meaning all systems that you today have flight plan 2012 data are impacted. It could be, there are many, it's a non-exhaustive list because I don't have the view into all your organizations, but certainly the FDP, so the operational ATC system of the ANSP is impacted. The airspace users' flight planning systems are impacted. Operational, the AIS, so the Aeronautical Information Service systems, we will get back to that a little later also. Flow system, again, all system where flight plan 2012 data is used today. And to remember, today we exchange flight plans, etc., via other means than swim. So this is also something you need to take into consideration. It's not only the usage, it's also the transport mechanism, the exchange mechanism, which is swim in the future after 2025. No legacy protocol for these exchanges at least. So what does it mean again? The change, we can compare it. I think some of us might remember the flight plan 2012 transition. That was complicated, some would say, but to that transition, we had no basic flight plan format change. It was mostly to the field content of that flight plan. Some additional fields could have been added also. It was the same exchange mechanism, and yet still we saw a translation to legacy format taking place many years after this hard big bang transition that this was. EFPL, so the transition to EFPL is a completely new format on FIXM. It's a new complete format. There are new content, performance data, and it's a new exchange mechanism. We're looking at a huge change here compared to what was 2020 flight plan 2012 transition. If we look at the FDP impact, to give some examples, the FDP will have to be able to use the new data that comes with the EFPL, the trajectory data to improve the trajectory fidelity and precision. That it will also have to use the specific performance data, including predicted climb, descent profile, etc., as also is part of the EFPL and FFI's release 1. And there are also additional data that is provided, such as top of descent, etc., top of climb. These are the data, example of data that you will get that you don't have today in the flight plan 2012. So this is the hard part, the actual mandate. So I think it's clear, and it has been clear on ground. We have the European ANSPs. These are the mandated ones. It's pretty clear. But when we talk about airspace users, I need to clarify this because it has been it's more complicated. So we have to look back into the PCP regulation where everybody was still mandated, but in that regulation you saw that flight planning system shall support. Then you have a capital EFPL. Now the E is a small letter in the front, so it's a similar concept or same. EFPL actually became the small E later, but they should be able to process this EFPL. And look at the deadline, 2022. So in PCP regulation from 2014, the airspace users, etc., were mandated to be ready with this last year. So then we go to CP1. It changed a little bit, and we need to look at, I know that I said AF5 in the beginning, but actually we need to look also into AF4, where airspace users and ANSP system must support the exchange of FFI's release 1 filing services once available as set out in AF516, meaning the AF4 deadline, which in CP1 is still 2022. So we passed that deadline, has been pushed to AF5, the swim family. And if we look into AF5, I think it's very clear that operational stakeholder must implement services that support the exchange of flight information, yellow profile as specified in the deployment program related to FFI's release 1 services. And then you have a long list of things, flight plan, route generation, etc. It's the same slide that Razvan just presented, where we mapped the CP1 requirement into the services that you know from FFIs. And now the deadline from 22 has been pushed to 25. Then looking even further into the deployment program, you have milestones associated with all stakeholders. This is a snapshot of the airspace users that they have to consume the NM filing services. And that means that the airspace user system has to be upgraded to use that service to file flight plans. And it has to be used in operation also. So these are clear requirements that we have tried to translate a CP1 regulation into. So the geographical scope, the regulation state as follows: the swim services must be deployed in the EATMN. That is defined in EU Regulation 549 from 2004. Effectively, the mandated stakeholders are ANSPs for FFIs, airspace users, and indirectly, of course, the manufacturing industry are also mandated as they are providing the systems for their customers. Looking at airspace users specifically, it was clarified for even us that there's a global impact on airspace users here, that all airspace users that operate within the EATMN airspace are mandated by this regulation. So we are looking at airspace users' impact beyond Europe of this mandate. And we have a CP1 deadline that says 31st of December 2025. The status of the European deployment, this is data coming from our monitoring exercise. So we have a new monitoring exercise. This is actually from last year's exercise. We just freezed the LSIP database 2 days ago, so I don't have the exact fresh data, but Network Manager, they fulfill their requirements. They have also shown that today. Airspace users, you have maybe all seen the Lufthansa has filed their first operational flight plan, meaning Lido systems are starting to push this out to their customers. So we have airspace users in progress. Air navigation service providers, they're also starting to, so ANSPs are starting to move. So we can only take the data that we have in LSIP, and so far there are no implementation among ANSPs on this matters. There are some reports on that they have this planned, and so far, the first time this year we are hearing about a little delays among the ANSPs who are reporting in LSIP that they're thinking they will be delayed with this implementation. So this is a snapshot of how it looks and how it looked last year. So to try and support the deployment, We have, as you know, the CEF funding, and these projects that you see here are candidate project for CEF Call 2022, where there is an FFI's EFPL or FFI's project among these projects, where we have big stakeholders participating into this. So it's a very promising project where we can see both airspace users moving forward with it and ANSP together in a collaborative manner. And this is something we would really like to push for also in the future, to have more of these multi-stakeholder projects to push the FFI's deployment forward. So next steps, yeah, I mentioned it already. We are envisaging, if we see a call 2023, that stakeholder can apply for funding, up to 50% funding to start implementing FFIs. FFIs will be a priority. We really want to move on this one. And this is both on ground and airborne stakeholder, of course. As I mentioned, it mandates all airspace users in the European airspace, EATMN, to adopt FFIs. And the important thing is that we need to ensure we have processes within SDM, and we have tried to use these processes to ensure that there was awareness on the matter. But maybe we need to move even more on this to ensure that everybody knows about this mandate. And again, we also have to support that the data is used on ground. And
I'm coming to stay here nearby my colleague and friend Magnus to tell you that we have had these discussions in a number of important working groups. We have discussed everything that you've seen just now with the airline operations group. We have discussed this in the context of the flight data and flight plan exchange steering group. And we came to the conclusion that we need to do something together, the network manager and the deployment manager. And hence, we were suggesting a common EUROCONTROL and MSDM FFI's implementation support initiative in order to address what needs to be done to speed up the implementation process. We will discuss this at a joint session of the NDOP and NDTech that has been called for the 1st of March 2023. This implementation support initiative aims at ensuring continuous support and monitoring of the timely implementation. And I'm underlining here continuous monitoring, because we need to know at all times where are we with this implementation. It will target all operational stakeholders and will define a roadmap for the necessary steps in order to achieve the target date that is currently stipulated in the implementing rule. And this roadmap will have to take into account also that you, dear colleagues, you will have to test all this with the NM systems. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but if you all come and tell us on the 28th of December 2025 that you are ready and that you all want to test with us everything by 31st of December, we will simply tell you, no, it's not possible. So we will need to do a little bit of reverse engineering to see the duration period required for the testing, etc. And this is why it's good, for instance, that right now a number of the airspace users and the computer flight plan service providers start being ready, because this helps in the implementation, this helps in the testing, and it also helps in finding if there were any other technical problems. What is also important here, and I'm going to say it in very plain language, we have a European Union rule that has been published in the European Union legal instruments, I would say, in the monitoring, how is it called, in the
no, in the CP1 regulation.
Not in the CP1 regulation, but that is published in the official journal of the European Union. The official journal of the European Union is not known by Korean Airlines, is not known by my very good friend sitting there from United Airlines, is not known by a number of people outside the European Union. And that needs to be formalized now through a publication, initial publication, most probably of an AIC by all the concerned states requesting FFI's compliant flight plans on when we are talking about operations in their airspace, and formally notifying users worldwide about that through a common text. And it must be a common text that is based on the requirements of the CP1 implementing rule and of the deployment program. And that text needs to be agreed very quickly because everybody needs to be notified. And I'm sorry to say it might go even further than just airspace users and computer flight plan service providers, because there might be other originators of flight plans. And of course, after we will have the agreement on the FFI's SARPs that are currently under processing by ICAO, and we strongly encourage all states to support this proposal for amendment to the ICAO SARPs. At the moment of the adoption of the ICAO SARPs, we can consider also with ICAO possibility to make a DOC 7030 amendment. But we need to have a common notification to the international civil aviation community urgently, because otherwise we cannot pretend how others outside the EU would know about that. And of course, during this first meeting, we will make the point on the level of the readiness of the various categories of operational stakeholders and which are the next steps to be taken. This is why we wanted to keep this presentation for the end of the day, because like that we were sure that you will remain in the room. Because it is a very important subject. It is a very, very important subject. It is building our future. All this is building our future, and we cannot afford that this does not happen on time and fulfilling all the requirements that have been set there. It's beyond just a legal requirement. It is beyond a legal requirement. It is about the performance of the network. Any questions for this session? We can take, we started at 16:10, we can take another 10 minutes, 10 minutes of questions. The first question, please introduce yourselves, name and the organization.
Good evening, Anthony Stevens from the UK Civil Aviation Authority. I'm also the UK member of the Air Traffic Management Requirements and Performance Panel in ICAO, which has developed FFIs. My question is, what is the legal basis for requiring operators from non-EU states to comply with an EU regulation?
In this particular context, the requirement in this context will apply only to the EU +2 member states, I would say the ones who have committed to implement. If other states would like to implement, of course, from a network manager point of view, we are ready to do it. And this will be the decision of each state whether they want to do it or not.
But the presentation has just said that all users of EATM airspace are mandated to use FFI's flight plans. The position of ICAO throughout the whole process of FFIs is there will be no mandate for its introduction and no big bang introduction of FFIs. This flies completely in the face of the ICAO position.
Yeah. Okay, let's this EATMN in this context. It's not the, I would say, the Eurocontrol definition of EATMN. It's the EU definition of EATMN. So in this case, this is applicable to the EU member states +2, I would say.
So what you're saying is non-EU state airlines are not mandated by this regulation?
No, that's
no, the airlines, yes.
Why?
When they are flying through the European airspace, through the EU airspace.
They're not required, they're not subject to EU regulations.
So maybe so, yeah, I fully understand your concern, and it's I think it's a shock for many.
It's not my concern; it's concern of airlines throughout the world.
Yeah, but still, so the legal requirements, I need to refer you back to CP1 regulation, and if I mean we are just the messengers of the mandate. So the legal requirement you can be found in CP1 plus the CESAR deployment program.
we asked specifically on this point clarification. SDM has asked clarification from the European Commission, and the clarification was all the users of the EU airspace are subject to that.
I ask again, what's the legal basis for that? Because I suspect some people might take you to court about it.
It's the European. European.
Yeah, so European legislation is the baseline, but I think we can discuss back and forth long on this. We can refer to, if you have some legal questions, we can refer you back to the European Commission who can take this discussion. Again, we are the messenger in the middle, just passing it and supporting the stakeholders.
This is exactly the reason for which we need this notification from all states to the users of their airspace. This is the exact very point to make this awareness full. And this will be the state decision how they will need to publish this in full conformity with the CP1 regulation. Any other questions? I told you it's not an easy subject, and it's good that we are finishing with this one because there will be some questions. Any further questions on this? The debate will be anyhow, will continue in the end of NDTech meeting. No other question, but a lot of rumors in the room. If you have questions, please write them on the yellow papers, and we will do our best to answer to them tomorrow. Many thanks for your attention. We are almost on time. I would like to thank to all my colleagues and who have supported those sessions today.